Okay then, let's begin. I realize there's fewer people. I believe there are some exams that you need to pass. I don't know exactly what the problem is, but anyway. Alright, then this is a lecture on construction. We already had one, but the first one dealt more with structure, so it had more to do with the skeleton and how the project was devised based on structure. And in this lecture, I would say what I'm going to show you today is what we usually don't see, what we are not showed. You know, we see pictures in architecture magazines like Arquitectonica or Detail, and they try to go into the flesh of the project, if you wish, thicker than paper, as we used to say with Alberto. And I would say that what's obvious is that this is a lecture that has an argument, but it doesn't have a script. Why? Because the ensemble of examples and interventions that I'm going to be showing you could be different. They could be interchangeable, and there is no specific script. However, there is a final plot, like a final argument. It's like a cook. It's like when a cook tells how he prepares the dishes and how he gastronomically works on his inventions in the kitchen. So that is a class, a lecture that has more to do with the cooking process than the outcome in itself. And it's based on experience. Just like in other lectures, we had the background, especially the first lectures, because of course we looked for the background where the sources are, and then we find reflections on the projects about the works. Here we do have the background. Sometimes I think they are self-explanatory, they're obvious. However, they need not be shown, if you see what I mean, because it's best to go straight to simplification. And you'll see my point. We'll see some constructive solutions which maybe have not appeared as a formal expression in relation with the landscape, in relation with a program, in the organization of a building, in another project, and some of it will be new. And what I try to explain today is how to prepare in the hidden side of the project the conditions through which then the construction of the detail will flourish. So it's not that the detail is pursued, as we see in the magazines, when when one designs the handrail or the coping or the cornice, or when one designs an arbor, but it's prepared within the project, the conditions by means of which the detail will flourish by itself in the construction. I think that's best. So based on that, there's an underlying message of a working methodology that's based on experience. Of course, you cannot tell beyond what you've done. There's this sentence, this quote, I don't know exactly who said that, but Garulenti said it, as far as I know. It's the sentence who says, he who is knowledgeable, he makes. He who is not knowledgeable, he teaches. So, for years, the fact of doing, making, was not that well regarded. In this very same school, drawn architectures were much more valued. Those with a more intellectual foundation, pseudo-intellectual at times, as a way to dress up architecture. Then luckily that ended, and the school started to understand that construction was very important, as I told you in the first lecture. So today, obviously, the solutions that I'm going to be showing you do not belong to any construction manual. They wouldn't be in a catalog either, but I think they can be useful for you. I think they can be useful in different ways. You can understand, on the one hand, what underlies in the examples beyond themselves, and then you can build an account book of construction solutions that you will be broadening with your own, the ones you will be contributing in your projects here in the school and then in your professional career, and you will end up with a whole family of solutions. And also a way of understanding what construction really is. In principle, if the first lecture dealt with skeletons and structures, I will be today dealing more with the building skin, so what covers up the architecture, which is not less important than the skeleton. In between the skeleton and the skin, we would have the guts, the entrails, the organs, so that would be translated into the fittings and the whole bunch of things inside a building that, well, fill it up with all these structures and lines and holes and grill works, and that would be a topic for another lecture. But, well, I haven't quite thought about doing that, but maybe I will someday, if I can. If we are to be discussing coatings and building skins, the first ones that come to mind are these, and we'll see which are more tectonic and others are lighter, you will see. And there's this sentence by Alberto for number 7 in Palimpsesto: what is the weight of your building? Here it would be what is the weight of your magazine, of your journal. Here you see some things like this cylinder, brickwork cylinder with the queen closer brick placed as a row lock, and then you can turn in a circle, which is nearly perfect. Then the crack, the fissure, materials don't touch each other, and then the structure of that wall over there, which sometimes shows here, there's some bands here, there, that appear now and again, and they coincide with the wrought solutions. Why? Because when you work on the brickwork, when it's a coating and it's the structure, because this is a metal building, it's made of iron pillars, some are hidden, some are, some stay open when they're in touch with the exterior, and those thin bricks there cover the part of the wrought solution, and they don't cut the queen closers in 2-3 centimeters to go in front. So there's a specific piece that is manufactured by the tile works, and that solution is provided, which is then attached onto the row lock, etc. Oh, here in this color picture you see this sort of tooth wall, and well, there they had to build a tilted wall on a building that's lined with brickwork, so that it would imply cutting the very first brick and the last one due to the inclination. So to prevent this, they create this serrate effect on the wall, so no brick needs to be cut. You may think that's a bit exaggerated. Yes, but this wall is facing west, so they're working with the shades, and it's a wall that, well, becomes part of a facade, like a frontal piece. And you can see this little window made up of metal carpentry with some hillocks to close, and all these little windows can be then opened for ventilation purposes, or, for instance, down at the bottom to your right-hand side, you see that this facade is lighter. I've been always obsessed with it. This building is quite old now, and I have been obsessed with the roller blind box, because it has had a long tradition in our country, maybe not so in other countries. It's a disaster, because, well, unfortunately, it's becoming extinct, at least in the way in which we used to build it. A box as thick as the facade with the plate there facing the exterior. Usually, stucco was applied to it, or it was painted with some color, and in the inside there would be a wooden plaquette to lock the drum. That's a huge thermal bridge, but above all, it's a huge constructive mistake. So I traveled to Portugal once, to Oporto, and I saw these roller blinds. I mean, those houses, those homes didn't have any blinds. That was their tradition. They had other exterior walls, and they had created like a little metal drum with some guides that was applied onto the carpentry. It would then go to the outside, to the exterior, and then well, a light blind was created in aluminum, in wood, so it was a meter and a half meter for a wall. There was then the brickwork ledge. It was enough. So here at the core of the rod solution, there's the profile. It's a metal profile, and that's a gray. Well, it's a U shape actually that gives into the grays in the paler, so it's the constructive system, the structure, and the rest of the thick of the rod solution, which is made of tile, the box of the roller blind is organized, and then it goes down from there. So all in all, this is a way to solve problems on the spot. I have the rod solution problem, I have the problem which is the roller blind, I have the problem here, the reinforced glass, framework glass, which is hardened, which is painted from the back for isolation purposes, and then one learns, and the building skins are created differently. This is another metal structure building, exactly the same, with the grays, rigidized knots, but the exterior walls are light, and they care for the different needs of the functional program. And here in this case the construction becomes much easier, be that white brick or Prodema panels and glass and window blinds. So I believe that's a much more precise system. This takes one to thinking which the value is of a building skin and which the value is of the structure, in this case the wall, and then one learns to construct, to build the other way around. It's like taking an octopus and putting it upside down, and which is the only way to master an octopus. That's the only way, otherwise it just won't stay still. So here, with this house, I learned to see that if the structure, the load-bearing walls are inside rather than outside, usually you would have the load-bearing wall, the wall itself, an interior chamber, and a partition wall. Now, this has a great deal of problems with structure, because if you have the exterior load-bearing wall, the beam, well, you can, it rises, and when rising it breaks, and then it fissures, and then it loads down onto the interior partition wall, which is not ready to bear that weight. Isolation is behind the wall, then the wall is much more permeable, and it's the wall which is the load-bearing wall, and it's just not good from the climatic point of view, and there are other problems related to it, the fittings, the grooves, because you need to have access to the wall. And when you reverse this situation, like you do on the roof, you can work on a reverse gable roof. You know it because it's in any construction manual you've studied. You can do the same with the wall. So the load-bearing wall goes inside. In the chamber you find the isolation, and then you have the facing, the building skin facing. So there are solutions that can be worked on, and in some other lecture you will be talked about that, because they're, outside it's not just the building skin, but it's the isolation as the only cover, it's the only lining, it's isolation. And here in this case the building skins are outside. You see this axonometry, how these are built. Those are the plates that we worked on with Alexandre Palleros. He would help us with the construction. He was the constructor, because he would then outsource the different professionals. So we didn't have a constructor as such. He would outsource the walls and the fittings, etc. And you see here the roof is reversed and the wall is reversed, and you see the load-bearing wall inside, and that's the building skin outside that can even hide the cover, you know, the roof and the drains. Then to your right you see some mechanism whereby the blinds and the windows are sash windows. They're activated by pistons, the windows, so there's certain mobility on the facade with very little effort on these details. Like blinds like this. Well, we had many examples. I mean, every day with Alexandre Parellols, we would work on the sketch, and then he would estimate the amount, and then he would outsource the different items in the budget. Interesting, because you have an exhaustive control on what is being built. I'm talking now about the small dimension. I mean, I have in mind the exercise that you have to carry it out. Then you have to think of your exercise with the construction mechanisms that will help you. That's the purpose of this lecture, because the other lecture was more kind of conceptual. Here you see inside, this is the wall made of perforated brick, and it's the load-bearing wall, and the other one is the stone wall. And you can see the structure, the beams, and the open roof plates. They're flat in this case, made of concrete, and then on top of that they receive the impermeabilization, isolation, and the final roof, and that's a detail. How to build, and then you don't have the detail. As you can see in the magazine, it's the stereotyped detail. When you finish your studies, you have to have some, so you need to find the best detail to be able to explain one's project. That's not the case. They build the detail, they work on the detail about something that needs to be done, whereas in the rest of the house, construction is carried out without the need for a detail. It's about constructing, you know, building the other way around in a reverse fashion. This is a small pavilion, and you see that the interior wall is the load-bearing wall. Then we have the roof deck, which covers it all, and you can work on a rod solution with impermeabilization, isolation, and gravel, like 14 centimeters, not even, let's say 14, with a little mesh and the concrete flooring and the impermeabilization on top of it, and the isolation and the gravel. And all in all, this takes 14, 15 centimeters. That's what we needed. And then we worked on the roller blinds and the facing, which is behind, with this isolation, behind the 10 centimeter reinforced block, because the load was minimal. Really, it was reinforced and filled with concrete, receiving the isolation, and the final building screen made of marine panels. It's a plywood panel, and the difference is that, well, they can remain outdoors and still be protected from humidity, from dampness. Similar to this building here, you see the complexity. It's totally faced with the wood. It's wood panel, it's thick board. And when you build the terrace niches or in the walls or different facings in the building, everything is done in wood. And then you see how the drains are used with this U-shaped mechanism, and how they given to the decks for the sake of impermeabilization. It's a reverse in construction, and then the wooden facing is placed, and then the carpentry, etc. By the way, this lecture will be uploaded, so you can check on the details later on if you're interested. This is the second house for my brother, and we did the same, but in a more sophisticated manner. Why are the three pieces different from a construction standpoint? Well, that is because their volume and the effort carried out by the structure and the height, etc., that made it necessary. And then, you know, the fittings were not open, but without a facing either, or the fact of not wanting to have any groove and have the structural wall open, etc. So how this is then taken to the foundation, for foundation purposes. It's a very simple small house, 90 meters, not even, but it was complex to build. Here's the construction process in an image. So it was done, the constructor had to organize around the whole plot of land a series of pegs with the strings to see how the geometry of the building would work, the inside, the outside. So it's a prodigy, It's marvelous. When I saw this, I was amazed. And I said, let's work on a model about this story, because the constructor in town had organized this fantastic story, and you could actually wander around this plot of land full of pegs and courts. So here the on-site layout really matters. What is it you see? You see, okay, these are just white little houses. No, because you'll see the rod solutions and how the rod solutions receive the walls on these three pieces. Then impermeabilization and some kind of floating roof built with white concrete plates this size, more or less, that we prefab on site. So those were on-site prefab, and the same for the three of them. So you place like a facing to protect the fabrics rather than a gravel roof, because it would roll down and it would slide with the inclinations. You would have to use gravel stops, and it would be much more complicated. Here, water runs well through this layer. Impermeabilization is below, and it reaches this fissure, those dark lines, which are the gutters. So, in other words, in the end, you adjust perfectly well, because otherwise, imagine the cast iron gutter here hanging from the floor, and the drain pipe and the bend tube, you have to go down and then drill the floor, and it would, spot the floor, and that would be entailed by a kind of construction that didn't have such rigor in all the construction solutions. You also see the concrete panels on the floor, those panels that are prefab on site, and they give good results, and they're really cheap. Here you see the solutions on the roofs. That's the body, that is the body of the study, really. Here there's the coping and the arbor, and here's the tile, and the layer on top, tile-like, it's white concrete prefabbed, plates in situ prefabbed, and how subtle, to work on this in a slope, to drain down, it's the same structure that remains open in the end. So it's a flat roof, and the same body, the body will have the staircase going up. That's the interior wall, the isolation, and the exterior wall, again ceramics with lime stucco as a finishing. Carlos, and what do you do with the fittings? What do they go through? The fittings, they go, behind the exterior wall. First, we build on the interior wall, the load-bearing wall, it bears the load from the roof, tiles, sometimes concrete hollow tiles. We'll see three different cases. But once you've done that, you have the house, but then you need the facing, and all the fittings are stapled onto the interior wall, but from the outside, and then you can place the plugs and boxes wherever they're needed. And if you have to do it on the floor, if you need, IT solutions, or you need a plug there, you can do that also. Once you've done this, when you work on the interior wall, it can be red brick, sometimes it's concrete block, ceramics, perforated brick. Well, usually perforated brick is not enough. We can use some rods and concrete. It could be a concrete wall, and it's very nice, this kind of brick, you know, because it has some lines that then when they're covered, the the patchwork is guaranteed, and if you don't coat it, then the light effect is very nice, and it's very cheap because you save the patchwork, and it's the only way to lower the budget, removing items from it. You take out the patchwork and the grooves and the painting of the patchwork, 3 items are removed, and it's cheaper, and the house looks better. And as you were asking, the fittings go on the outside, you project the isolation, but previously you would leave rustless hanging hooks there when you work on the interior work to the chamber, to the outside. You leave half a meter or so, a rustless hanging hook, which is flexible. Then you run the fittings there, you project the isolation, and you start raising the exterior wall. Could be block, it could be brick, whichever, which is the exterior wall. Then the structure loads, bears the load, so it doesn't rise, because when you raise, then it's the fissure that you can see in any roof, because when you reach the final ledge, there's a crack there. A crack is usually caused, and then water penetrates, and then there's a pathology, and then insurance, etc. So people are very alert about that. We need to be cautious. So my advice would be, let's be aware of it, and you do it like that. You don't transmit structures to the ledge or to the partition wall, because of course that would crack the inside part of it. Once you've done this, just block, ceramics, part perforated brick, well, then there's lime stucco. I say lime stucco because if you only do it with cement, it's very hard and the cracks appear much sooner. Now we have fibers and intelligent stuccos, it's marvelous. But if you're in a little town, in a construction work, and of course you can resort to fantastic latest generation stucco with polypropylene fiber, well, let's use lime, because lime alleviates the strength. It hardens slowly, and that's very good. It hardens very slowly. It can even turn to stone. With a little bit of cement, white cement, you prepare the paste, you look for the fine aggregate, and that's your patchwork. And that's the outcome. That's the outcome. In the case of the piece that we saw, that's the brick with the little lines. And here, like inside, there is a toilet, because that's the volume. Well, that's a partition wall. That's a partition wall. In the case of another one of the pieces, take a look at the solution. It's interesting. The drain pipe, what I told you about the pieces, and the final piece and the water drain pipe that will go down this way. And as a result, that is the interior part. You can see here the construction joints. In the third piece, take a look. The final facing is the same. Here's the isolation, the impermeabilizations, and there are the beams, these beams here, and the hollow tiles. And this fissure here, that's due to the fact that we made the most of the lowered height for all the carpentries, 220, 215, 220, and there we can place the machines, giving into this area here, but those for the brain, the hose, those would be there. This level here when the platform is elevated. That's the tile, the cantilever tile, which is small, and the carpentries that are metal framework that you just place there. And that's the result. Again, the brick on the wall with the lines and the hollow tiles, concrete, painted, open beams and the tile, and it's a splendid effect. And then the floor, just like concrete floor covering. It's tricky, you know, because these floor coverings break. I didn't work on that many joints either, so... And there's something else. If you use a thick aggregate, 2, 3, 4 centimeters thick aggregate, when you prepare the mortar paste and you pour it, if you want it to look rustic, you just brush it with a sweep or with a brush and you scratch it. But if you want it to look smooth, like smooth floor covering, and you know, people are supposed to live there, and you know, in the kitchen there might be liquids being poured, so you crystallize. You use the terrazzo polishing machine. You do, I don't know, 3, 4 stones and you polish, and it's fantastic, fantastic terrazzo. If you want it a little bit more coarse, you know, more porous, more absorbent, then you give it a stone, one less stone. The secret is to use a very small aggregate, because when you start polishing, you realize that once they have prepared the paste, maybe all the aggregate has gone to one side, so it's very granulated on one part of the paste and not as much in another amount of paste. So it's like polish more there, and you know, you need to strike a balance between aggregate and the cement. So with fine aggregate, it's much more uniform. So when you polish, when you finish, the floor covering looks beautiful. And then if you use something else to provide it with consistency, but to make it more flexible, some fibers, etc., you need to be careful when polishing, but it can be done, especially in the first part, you know. And usually it doesn't break. Otherwise, every 5 square meters, a joint, you know, a disc cut joint, and that's it. As to the linings, I was obsessed, you know. When I wanted to do a work, I worked on some house in Estartit with manual brick, you know, faced and paint. Then I said it doesn't work, because then I need to use thin wire cut brick and you know, fold the fabric and then the coping, a prefab, artificial. I said, no, I need some material that I can build with. And the material was a brick that was 40 centimeters long. I went to the Toro company. They had balusters and they prepared these kind of things, and they were not doing very well as a company. And I said, can we work on an invention? And Manel Serra from Toro, he was a very smart guy, very nice also, and he said, I had to change this. I have to change this company. I have inherited it. He was very young, and that will be a ruin, because people don't buy balusters from me, or ornaments, artificial ornaments. He had quarries, you know, white marble quarries in the Maresme, up in the Pyrenees also. So we said, okay, let's use the ground aggregate. He had everything set and ready for his artificial ornaments with, you know, white cement, and we built those pieces. In the beginning, it was a solid piece, molded piece, 40, you know, 40 was the size, like a Roman old brick. So 40 times 15, which is the standard size of a brick, it's 30-15 really, you know, 30-15, well, on the hand, well, it's difficult to handle, but, well, depends on the size of the hand also. So 40 centimeters, then we did 10, because 10 you can hold it very well, and 38 millimeters. So this allows, you know, the brick was solid in the beginning, so you could create a vertical joint. We would do them with white cement, with water paste, and a very fine aggregate, you know, with sand, with river sand, and then the joint becomes sunken, and it really marks the brick and the vertical joints. Then I realized that I needed more things. I needed to create chambers, because if the facing is exterior and the chamber is ventilated, I need to ventilate the chamber. So the first open chambers appeared. You place here the works, etc. But also I could build, eliminating one piece into, window blinds. And then I realized that I could prepare continuous reinforced pieces, larger, to prepare slats, metal slats. I was obsessed, and I learned that because I heard Antonio Robert say this. He said, architects have a serious problem, because when we do a wall that protrudes, as in a salient angle, as happens with bedrooms, and if it's 30, the size, it's very heavy, and if it's 15, it's a bit ridiculous. So how do we do it? So I stayed with that question, and with this system, I could, finish like that till I had a fine angle, but with the 30 thickness of the wall, respecting the interior chamber, the interior structure wall, and I could combine it with the concrete, with porches, with stone facings, or with stucco elements and colors. And then you have these little windows. That little window is very interesting, because the window sill is tilted, and since this is a pool, a tiny swimming pool, the reflection from the water comes up through the window, and you can see it on the bedroom ceiling. Well, interesting. Then other stories arose, and here I used it in the yacht club. You see the open angles and the whole repertoire, and what started as a single piece became a family, So here, the very first piece manufactured by Triginet, and the other one manufactured by Alonso, it joins with a tongue and a groove. Then you look at the mold. You can do whatever you want to do with this. You cut it, and it's easy to cut. It's marvelous. So this piece opens up a new world of possibilities, because it's then completely sealed. The horizontal joint is sealed 100%, I would say. And then, as of then, together with Lucia, when she built those houses in San Cugat, we started seeing all this, through Sabater. He was a construction professor, and he was in charge of the Quantity Surveyors Association magazine. Well, Sabater, he helped us find a solution, because this brickwork, it can be worked on large piers, and you have to reinforce it. What does this mean? Well, you cannot have, brickwork that is not reinforced. If it's a facing, if it's a lining, then we have some frames to work on, little structures, stainless structures or galvanized structures manufactured by Murthor, and you just place them. You have to learn how to place them. But if you go to Murthor or Toro, the manufacturers, they give you the solution, how much you have to put in a work, in some corners, and the lintels, when you reach the windows, in some places where the structural need is greater, because a fissure could appear, a crack could appear, because then if you do that, there are no cracks, and you build, well. If you have coping pieces that are cut to fold the fabric and raise it and close it, and then you can work on lintels, the size you want, because the piece is prefab, with the metal trusses, and you hang them onto the structure, and you can work on extraordinarily large lintels, enormous holes, and the view is just, a single 38mm piece. Here is a window blind box to the inside to prevent the thermal breach and the windowsill, well, that's the reinforcement, and the mortar pieces, other solutions with the isolations, the inside wall, the flooring, etc. If you want, since you will have a look, since you will have the lecture uploaded, you can have a look at it later. This piece, you can cut it, but in a beveled fashion. You couldn't do that with a manual brick because I didn't want to do that, you know. This is a concrete prefab piece, so you can do anything with it and resort to the geometries that you require. Then, this is the vertical hole here, right? Or the solutions of the handrail. You can work on the handrail in front. Here, the lintel, it's exactly the same as the other pieces, but the truss is hung on to the concrete beam, and here the floor covering on the side, but you don't see, you know, what you used to see in the past, but the fabric is inside, and then another layer is added, but then there, you know, spotlights, lighting system, size of a brick, then you incorporate, because it's an open brickwork, and then there's the coping piece and the thickness of the two chambers, coping piece on top. So it's just the piece, that's my point. And with a single piece, you solve everything. And these are the houses, ones in Madrid, and others are here in San Cugat with the single component, the terrace, post-stressed structures because they have 4-meter cantilevers. Anyway, stone linings, stone coatings. I mean, stones, you can have many different kinds of stone here. Stone goes directly to the outside. We have cases of stone coatings, ventilated facade. Here, stone is like a second facade, like a filter, and it combined with the rails and the profiles, etc. It well adds up to the whole story. Here, the cantilever is always 40 centimeters, all in all. I saw that in Paris, you know, everything was 40 centimeters, and it's so beautiful, you know. But this aggressive cantilever that we were accustomed to here is a little bit, well, as I said, aggressive, just to be nice, those balconies, etc. So we need to be a little bit polite, you know, with the city, and build facades that are quite flat, and, you know, not that bulgy. And those 40 centimeters can help you work on the interior part and on the carpentry and have the inside structure, and then the building skin is useful to then clean the glasses without resorting to, you know, hanging structures or anything like that, because there are sliding solutions that help clean the glass, and then you have the possibility of the balcony. And here in this case, the stone, which is the added value, you know, because there are the battens. Yes, you know, we've seen the battens and the ones we saw before. Here the stone is opaque, it's a thin line, and the battens are wooden, so they create frameworks on sliding guides. And not the case here. The battens are made of aluminum with wood embossing. So they look nice because they look even rough. They're not heavy, so the sliding solution is much lighter and no maintenance is required. And maintenance, instead of being an opaque line, it's translucent marble, and marble comes sealed, you know, with the studded glass. So it's the glass that bears the load. The stone is cut in plates. Marble is marble, right? 4 or 5 millimeters, and then the studded goes onto the frames, you know, with structural silicone onto matte stainless T-shapes, and then the handrails are also stainless, and it really resembles that on Balmes Street, but it's extraordinarily more sophisticated in the construction and in the maintenance. Here is a detail of how you do that. In other cases, the stone is like a facing, so that the ceilings can be faced also. They can be coated also. If you want to create the idea that a body flies on top of another, if you prepare this in the occult side of the project, like in the kitchen, it's tricky, right? It just doesn't work because the rod solution here is at one level and here it's at a different level, horizontal, so the rod solution has to jump. So you want to have a clean outcome because otherwise it looks like a dent and it looks awful. Now, based on that, there is a series of mechanics and the interior rod solutions. They need to be prepared and you need to work on them, and then you have those matte stainless angles that will receive the stone plates. They have the joints, ventilation, small illuminations, window blinds to reach that. You see perfectly here? That's what happens. There are some cases like here in this building. What we do, we did with Alberto, in this case in Paris, we provided them with metal frameworks, aluminum in this case. You prepare the carpentry, it comes with an aluminum framework that takes the thickness of the isolation chamber wall and it protrudes outside just enough to receive the stone facing, so it's impeccably sealed, you know, and you can see that here. And the fact that several windows like this ones don't exist, well, we reached a conclusion because of the French regulations, you know. French regulations are amazing. Number of luxes inside cannot go above certain figure, but they're so strict. So we eliminated like random, not random way. There was a guy measuring the light there and he gave us the okay. He gave us a go and then he would prepare the models and now you have the luxes inside the office. Well, that helped us organize the facade, right? That's a picture of a gentleman that just went in, Juan Bellamat, splendid. And these are the metal frameworks and the whole system of frames in detail. Because, you know, in France, it's regulated, you know, what you can, how much you can work on the carpentry, if you can take it more to the outside or to the inside. So in the end, we reached a deal. We had a deal, incredible deal, until we determined the exact positioning. So we took the canopies individually from each block, we built the frames. So then life, you know, pays off. And this building in Paris, for the people who built it, and Michelin, who enjoys it, and the architects in Paris themselves, they're really happy about it. And next to the theme park, with all sorts of stupid things to, you know, put it this way, you can imagine. This serious building, in the end, it's like one needs to be grateful for it. The wall is structural in this case. Alberto, can you answer? Structure isn't the core in the wall, it's like a concrete wall. Then we see the wall, as Carlos said. Apart of what Carlos said, the cantilever helps hide the occult beams. Yes, the obstacles, yes, in the patios where there was cantilevers, yes. So, you know, building in France is not that easy. The architect, in principle, doesn't have the responsibility, is not as accountable as an architect here in our country. So you need to negotiate and reach an agreement, because he who is accountable for the windows is the one who builds and places the window. It's not the architect. That's an advantage, you know. Everyone has its own burdens to carry. So depending on what you want to do, the specialist worker then says, no, I'm not going to do that because there are no guarantees. And then have to talk to him and convince him, and then they go, okay, I agree there. So why not? In the end, you know, people in the field of construction, they're great, generally speaking, they're nice people. So you agree, you reach a solution. And I would say that in a work, you should never impose anything, you know. It's my piece of advice. You can always find a solution that meets everybody's needs, the client, you know, economically, the constructor, the workers, because the work is complex and you need to get along with everybody and end the whole project and still be friends, at least. Let's try. So that's my advice, you know, what you see in some movie, you know, the architect arrives and says, you tear this down. No, no, let's not tear anything down. Let's be humble, let's be modest, and let's place a great deal of effort and love and affection and try to convince everybody. Here are the frames, they're bright and shiny, and that's added light they hadn't taken into account. It's very nice. The stone is ventilated? Is the stone ventilated? No. It's just stapled? Yes. Yes. This one here, this is a project by Lucia. And you see here a facade made of dove white stone, and the frames are made of steel. It's stainless steel framework. So with this, you gain a great deal of plasticity on the facade, and it's extraordinary, and you minimize the impact of the rod solutions. If you walk in Gran Via Street, beyond Urgel Street, there's a building that I did years ago. It's like a grid plan. If you have the chance, take a look at it. See if you can find the rod solutions. If you find it, you'll be given a prize. You'll win an award, because it's a whole story, you know, to build that. And it's point shapes, you know. In the end, few people see this thing, but the satisfaction, you know, of having done it in a natural way, it's kind of pleasant. Because in the end, what remains for the architect is the finished work. The only satisfaction that we have is when we finish a work and we say, well, based on the first sketch, first idea, that came out. It could be better, probably. Next time we'll try to make it better, but at least that's what we have. And that's the satisfaction, the only satisfaction that we have, because the rest, well, it's a bit boring and it's tiring and there's displeasure, but it's our job. What can we do? Here is a detail of how the construction was carried out. You can ask Lucia. She led that work. Can you explain, Lucia, where the rod solution is? Well, you can see it a little bit. You can see it here. In Gran Via, you don't actually see. Here, there's a flat steel providing light, and you can see. Then there are building skins that are different, and we'll discuss now lighter skins with the roller blinds that you can alternate. As I said in another lecture, the positioning of the intermediate space, that kind of great climatic gallery, which is so Mediterranean, shown by Coderc in the Barceloneta. But, well, yeah, one cannot stick to what has been done, and that's it, even if it's well done. So here's the detail together with Xavi Martí. He worked on the layout. You see the carpentries, the pillar, and how it thins, so the separation wall, I mean, that's filled with isolation. And then there's the profile that's going to staple the window blinds with the U, and then the U shape and the carpentry, and sometimes the window blinds run inside. In other cases, they run outside, and you see the rails going through this space here, and you see this marvel, I should say, this thing, right? And then came Juan Villamat and took this wonderful pictures. So this is the story of the inner part. When I went to Amsterdam and I would see the inside of the houses, I said, well, architects are so lucky here because they cover everything, they are not embarrassed. Maybe they are, but I don't know. You see the insides of the houses, and like that you manage that, part of the internal life of the building is projected outside, depending on the position of the windows, depending on the bashfulness of the people. And I think that's kind of nice. Here you see the window blind that Lucia was referring to. And it's interesting, she did it with Jambi, he was working for Coder, and there's a little fissure, you know, when it locks, it doesn't quite lock. There's a tiny little ray of light going through a few millimeters, and that's nice because otherwise it's too opaque. Or the gradermetic solutions, well, I think that's fine. And then as a result, you have inner spaces, or that in Bilbao, which is much more sophisticated, you know, in Bilbao with the weather there. Here you see the details, see the drain pipe, you know, there are terraces there, and where does water come down from? I mean, you take the water to the inside of the flat, or you tilt it to the back, and maybe water enters the parquet floor, and you let it drip, or maybe you let it drip on the facade. No, you cannot do that. So you need to place a drain pipe just in the end of the floor covering, where the handrail will be fixed and where the blinds will be fixed. So you create a mini gutter there, and the mini gutter, well, is then loading the weight on the jambs with the whole substructure of the facade, and you see the drains there collecting the water from the terrace. So the terrace is bigger, you know, with the cable there. Now it's working. So the terrace is bigger, and there you go, the window blind and the drain here. It's fantastic because you can't see it. You just don't see it, and water falls down from the terrace, floor covering, but the drain collects it and takes it to the different pillars. And there are many drain pipes and very small. That I advocate that, you know, many drains but small. Imagine 1 square meter of terrace, 1 square centimeter of a drain. So that's the kind of estimate that I work on. And then you have a pipe of 40, 4, 6, 60. I prefer to work on many and well distributed to prevent the water from running. And then, you know, these gutters can be flat. They're short and they drain here and there, so they don't need a slope. You know, the gutter slope, Pere Llimona used to say that was horror. He always used flat gutters because imagine, you know, tile roofs and a drain pipe there, disaster. So flat gutters, but you need to prepare for that. So it's best to have many small pipes because if they become clogged because of I don't know, a ball or a pine needle, everything goes onto the drain pipe. But there are many then, you know, you have on a terrace, one at each side, and they can be smaller, very small. You know, in Miami now we're doing something fantastic because in the United States you cannot have a single drop on the facade. So it's marvelous because we work on them with matte stainless steel material, and they are into the profile, you know, behind the U shape, and the gutter goes through that, and you know, water is collected there. Other aluminum solutions, you know, with these ledges. Here's the aluminum. It's on the substructure, on the brick wall. Here you receive the plates that ventilate more, and you know, when it's closed, the whole facade is locked, we would say. So there are 200 different ways of placing these light exterior walls. Here is the case of a building in Via Augusta, and you see the same aluminum plate. Is a standard plate, by the way, and it can be used here on the wall. That's not a ventilated facade. The same plate can be used on the slats, so you place them horizontally with the lines facing down, and you can place it creating like a filter facade, light filter facade. Then you hide a little bit the offices, etc. And well, that's the way it's built. And the moment comes where the aluminum itself a sponge-like aluminum, is used on the fittings machines because it's porous, you know. It's an aluminum that is injected with air. It's like a scorer, you know, light goes through it, and in the night it shines, and it's very nice with four fluorescents, and during the day it's ventilated, and you don't need grill works or anything like that, and the whole wall is ventilated, and then it's as thick as you want, and it's quite cheap because when injecting air, the aluminum weight is so low. Lucia, she used it in the evangelical church for the facade. Then we have the plates below, and the other one is green. Or Lucia also used these meshes that she used in the kindergarten in the church, but she would also use it in that small building. It's so translucent during the night, but it's opaque during the day, and it's like a grid, you know, because that was a complex institution, difficult people there, people with many issues, people with constant supervision and monitoring. So this kind of facade is useful because you don't want to see inside, you know, in daylight, and there's a grill work there. You can clean the glasses, and climatically it works very well. Light is monitored, so these lighter building skins allow you to do anything, virtually anything, as I showed you with the house in the past. You can open them sometimes, this place, because sometimes there are doors. And we reach here a topic that is crucial for me, that of the joints. So the joint, for me, used to be a problem because I said, I would like to have like running materials, you know, continuous material, because I always see the joint and I don't want to see it, you know. The manufacturers, what do they do? I'm referring to porcelanosa, you know, porcelainic tiles manufacturers. They prepare larger and larger pieces, you know, a meter and 20, you know, 120 or 60 or 80 or 90, 1 meter. And I said, but it's even worse because I can see the joint even more, and there's dilation, and it's bigger and bigger. So the joint issue is becoming paroxysm because the piece is bigger and bigger. But maybe the solution should be the opposite, and that's what I think. Logically, if you want to have something that's nearly a running material, what's ideal is to have thousands of joints, right? Why? Because then the joint as such disappears and it becomes something more circumstantial, you know, with the floor covering. They don't touch each other because the large joints have to be distributed in a room, and you have to modulate everything. Mr. Mies, he did it very well. The rest of us that were not that wise, and then there's dilation joint and it breaks, and there are always, you know, things that happen in the geometry of the project. It's difficult to perfectly modulate for a specific piece, and then you find it and you don't get it, and it's 1 centimeter more or less, and everything is ruined because it was cheaper or they found a replacement somewhere. So again, everything is ruined. So here you see different materials, and the trick is that there's a lot of joint, you know, mosaic, Roman floor coverings. They did that, you know. In a pool, in a swimming pool, that's gresite, you know, floor covering. But in this wood wall, I mean, the points of the plywood panels that have their own joints. So every plywood panel is an addition of 8 or 10 sheets or 6. So if you cut the edges of those panels and you saw them and you prepare little bars, so it's a union of thousands of joints, and it can look like a curtain, you know, like a drape that's a running drape with its, you know, wrinkles, you know, and it's creased. So this floor, when we worked with Borja and Lucia in Roca, they said you need to use a Roca ceramics material because we manufacture Roca ceramics. And I went there and I said, well, that's awful what I saw. And then we used this metal piece, quite nice, 30 times 40, I don't quite recall, or 20 maybe was the size. And I thought of the tile floor, and I said, no, that's awful. Solution. Then I said, can I put it on a mesh? Can I cut it and put it on a mesh? And they said, yes, no problem, no effort, no over cost. So in the plant, they would give me the panels, they would cut them with a saw or with laser, I don't exactly know, and they put them on a mesh. So it's the way they sell it to you. Advantages, well, even the staircase steps, you can adjust to the exact measure because it's cut with a computer, you know, so they don't care which way they cut. So you adjust depending on the pieces that you have, and the floor is continuous, and that's the way we get the material. And it's the same with foam rubber pyramids or the little wire strips of the floor. Thousands and thousands of little strips, so it breathes, and you can log it, and the sensors are occult, and all the possible structure are occult, and you know, the spotlights, lights, emergencies, it's all built in. And if the facade is made up of thousands of glasses on top of it, we will see that in the next session, the final one. Then the facade is also continuous with thousands of angled glass, thick enough, and they present a facade with you know, optical formal achievements. And then you have the work, the ceilings, the floorings, the floor coverings, the plywood panels, the facade. Everything is made up of hundreds or thousands of joints, and you have the feeling that it's a continuous material. So it's clear there. And as I said, this can be part of your own, you know, log that you work on, but you can use them as they suit you best. I don't know. You have technology supporting you to do that. We will discuss this later. You see the ceiling and the pyramids, foam rubber pyramids. It's a very cheap material, 4 or 5 euro the square meter, and it's for, you know, places like TV sets or recording facilities. You know, acoustically they're wonderful, and it's continuous because these rubber foams come in rows, and you stick them, and you don't see the joint. And there are the LEDs, kind of golden tone LEDs, lighting, graphite, black, fly wing kind of color. Fantastic. It's comfort, and it's acoustic comfort, of course, you wouldn't even imagine. And that's the ceiling. When we worked on the Congress Hall with Alberto, we did that also, and it's just a mesh, you know, galvanized mesh, and it's mechanized on guides with the hooks that you know, staple it onto the ceiling, so you can dismantle everything and you can register everything. You know, the spotlights are on top, and light is provided through this, you know, this emergencies, the detectors, air conditioning, the return smoke detectors, etc. Anything that can go through that space are behind the ceiling, behind the ceiling, and that's in a home, in a private house, with this foam rubber wall like here, and the ceiling. When I showed you this house the other day, I said the fittings are not there. Of course, the installations, the fittings are there. Where are they? We have a bucket of concrete, and the facing, and the flooring is stainless. Where are the fittings? They're in between. There's a chamber of 80 centimeters, and that's where you'll find the fittings coming from the machines that are outside the house, and they're united through a subterranean gallery, geothermal wells, so that the fittings are absolutely efficient from the energy standpoint. So the trick is that the ceiling is this electro-welded mesh, which is standard. used to create, fences and grids. And you see here the ceiling with the spotlights. And the box here, that's the Congress Hall in Barcelona, and everything is, mounted there. And the guides in this case are structural guides to hang from there all sorts of weights. We did with Alberto the plans, fantastic. The hooks there, you can place your stalls or hang spotlights. They've hung even, cars from this ceiling, anything. And with Ramon Sanabria, we worked on this ceiling for the intermodal terminal in the Barcelona airport when there was a, Spanair there. So you hide everything and you can record and log everything because you just, let the hooks go and clack, the cover opens and you can work on any fitting inside because then you can see everything. So, an advice, do not embed, do not hide the fittings. You want to see them always, because if a pipe breaks, well, you need to find it and you have to dismantle the whole building and you don't want to do that. Then, ventilated facade facing, ceramics, I told you, 3 + 3, 6 millimeters. So this requires the geometry to prepare the conditions, to take the plate, which is standard. And I don't know why it was invented, these 3x1 ceramics panels. They would be laminated in Italy, and Saloni would import them here into Spain. They wanted to create their own plant here, but they didn't get the permissions. So this is a material I never quite knew why it was invented. 3x1 times 3 millimeters thick, probably for any industrial finishing, like the betonite appeared when concrete didn't look good and had the tunnel facing, and it was like a wooden cement, looked like concrete, and you could, mount it easily, economically, and it supports the exterior. It's not eternally because nothing lasts forever, but those panels, what did we do? With the Narcís Poza, great guy, a genius, he would place inside 3 + 3 with fiberglass some angle bars, some profiles with neoprene, so they have these U shapes that fit, with the hook. So you prepare based on the concrete structure, and you see the inside with the impermeabilization and the stainless fence, 4x4, no, 5x5 with the injected isolation. Those tubes have some hooks, and on top of them, with the right geometry, you clip all the panels, 3x1, 6 millimeters, that are relatively light. You can do it manually or by suction as if it were glass, creating the vacuum. So you can record that, we had to find a leak, I remember, once in that house, and we dismantled and the dam drop had run 30 meters, from a tube that was poorly sealed. So we did the enlargement again, and we, assembled the facade again, so you can be safe enough, and it's dry, because there's the chamber and the isolation inside, etc. Here you see how these are received, the carpentry and the corners and the copings. See the carpentry. In the end, you say, where's the trig? The trick, if you want things to look like that, there's only one trick. It's about working and working long hours to prepare for this occult side of the project, right? To prevent some things from happening and to generate this. Here's like difficult to understand. Where are the wall thicknesses? Where is the roof? Xavi Martí worked with this, or the joints. So in the end, it's not just about designing a finish, I don't like that. That's pure language. It's figurative language. It's this other story. Preparing in the kitchen the conditions based on which then the construction will flourish in itself. And Mies van der Rohe, he has been the best in history. Then it looks like he did nothing, everything runs smooth and everything looks good and it's fantastic. But to hide everything when preparing the project, That is so important. And I would like, that would be the underlying message. I mean, you can jot down any solutions you want, drains, impermeabilization, and reverting the constructions. Here's the story of Emilio and Luis. They did 3 dimensions in 2. Then we have the betonite panels, like in this building in Figueras. It's the headquarters of Fisesa company. These are utilities, sewage systems and lighting and all the, rubbish coming from the utilities, water. So the building is quite opaque, and then inside there's some spaces. So this plant here, this floor with betonite panels that are fantastic. They look great. And here in the inside part, the metal structure, the deck, everything is combined, and the glass is mounted, and the guide, and the drain. Since there'll be condensation, because I didn't use Climalit here, because there's one thing: if you isolate a building very well, you will have weak points, It's very difficult. They just will be. And the condensation will affect those weak points, the carpentry or that joint or that material, and the condensation will be there because it will concentrate precisely on the weak point. Exterior dampness, different temperature, well, it just goes through the funnels wherever condensation finds them. So in some cases, it's best to isolate less, and then you distribute. If I don't know, buy a Climalit, but then I don't isolate anything else, well, it'll be raining from the roof, from the metal deck, and it can actually happen, through the spotlight. So you need to strike a balance and decide. The architect needs to make a decision, and in this case, we chose studied glass, so solar control, the exterior trees, Populus texana, and they have their leaves 8 months, 7 months, or 6 months every year. So yes, 6 months. So it's pure sun heat. But in winter, of course, we want the sun here in the southern facade, and they sieve, and the branches help, and the betonite panels are here. Like the same day, you see the concrete flooring with this built-in grout lighting and the aluminum solution and the trees and the window and the deck inside. So it's like industrial construction at the price of an industrial plant, because we took part in a tender for a plant, but then in the end it became a cinema studio. And then we have this ventilated facade. It was a mess, to organize all this, and then the problem is that the light will act inside. If we talk solid stone, solid rock, I showed you some examples. That's the whole story about the stone. So what is the secret? To cut the stone, in such a way that, this cut allows you to combine it with the edge of the other one, and with 32 blocks you build a whole pavilion, and you use Gore-Tex blankets with this 1 or let's say 12 millimeter that you lose with the saw cut. I brought this because I said I would show you the scaffoldings and the way in which the stones are prepared to then build the wall. And that's the idea that, these people are ready to do that. And they do it right. And they still do it nowadays. And then, as an aside, this is what I call the logbook. The logbook is something that you write and draw. It's the detail. It's handmade. If you have to go to a tender with the regional government, let's not work on 200,000 details and 400,000 plans. But if it's a house for a friend, something like that you're working on, anything, small building, something like that, you work on the 3 type details to, collect the money from the executive project. And then when you're working on the executive project, you start to draw everything. And every detail, you agree with, with the expert. The expert comes to the study and says, well, this is very expensive. Oh, no, no, no. This, I mean, we can't afford this. We cannot do. Well, in the end, you negotiate, and with the whole, drawing story, and you reach a deal with each of the, workers specializing in the different fields of action. That's a view of one of our logbooks. I mean, from the antenna, television or antenna, they have to be outside so that they don't make the roof ugly. This is a little tower, and here's the drain pipe, and here are the joints and how they get together, because the wall is tilted, and the way of placing the carpentry is on cylindrical rods, and the isolation. So this is like the whole work drawn and reflected on paper. And then let me tell you a story. I wanted to do those pillars. That's the yacht club in Estartit. I wanted to create this stainless pillars because, it's in the sea, and I wanted to work on this nice canopy, sieving the light. That's quite widely used. So the pillar, I wanted to do a cross pillar, cross shape, because then it receives the T-shaped beam and it articulates perfectly well to build, the arbor. So the cross pillar, stainless steel, because it's next to the sea, and of course I didn't want it to rust in 4 days. Stainless steel, good. Quality stainless steel. So, welding, 4 crossed handrail iron bars in cross, it's so expensive, and to polish them in stainless steel. I told Mrs. Pallarols, and he said, well, I checked it, every little pillar of the arbor back then would cost 20,000 or 30,000 peseta. I mean, incredibly expensive, maybe 15,000, I don't remember, but very expensive. So I was concerned, and I said, well, I calculated how much the inox plates would cost, and I said, okay, if 2 of these, stainless railings, I cut them both and I, fit them, I can have a cross pillar, no welding, no polishing, no nothing, and I just pay the cost of the stainless railings. I told Pallarols, and he said, well, you got it. You will have your, railings and your cross pillar. So sometimes you think of one thing, but then you can find a solution. You can find a different solution. And here are the details, how the building skins are constructed, and it's splendid. This weekend I will go there for lunch, and 25 years have gone by, and it just looks the same, even better. It's taken care of. There's good maintenance. The hotel and catering industry take good care of it, but that's the way it looks now. Let me finish with another story. We've seen several solutions so far. What happens when you have to build a small thing and you want it to be like the marvel in construction? At a certain point in time, back in the 90s, in 1990, a friend of mine who had a model agency in this small palace in Montaner Street next to Mitre Street, he would commission me with a project. The models went there for their casting sessions, photographers, so very, nice atmosphere. And he said, well, I have a cook here, a chef, a French cook, very good, and I, feed the photographers and the models and those, the guys from the advertising agency. I have to feed them here in this premises. So I would like to have, because this is an effort, I would like to turn this into a restaurant for these such, funny people. They're coming more and more because it's so good that sometimes they would have 40, 50 people there. So at the back of the French palace, there was a small patio, this one here. This one, it was narrow and long in the small palace. So he said, we could do something here because I would like to eat among the plants. And I said, it's very difficult because plants require their climate, water, temperature, and people, work differently differently, but okay, I'll work on the idea. Do you know what this entails? That's the patio, like the backyard. That's the plan of the old palace, and the small area, 90 square meters, that I built at the back. The works lasted 6 years. 90 square meters. 6 years. That's what we did. We refurbished the interior space of the little palace, and you see the first drawings of this thing. It's like origami, you know. Which was the idea? Why did it last 6 years? Well, for many reasons. I mean, my friend was not in a hurry. I was not in a hurry. We were enjoying the project. He wanted to test. I mean, he was obsessed about total perfection. We even went to Japan to find a paint that they used on a Kawasaki motor bike, a mother of pearl color, to paint the fairing of the Kawasaki, and we, I mean, needed a year to import that paint because it was then as transparent as a pearl, and he wanted those translucent traits of the mother of pearl and the elements. I mean, to see, just for you to see, you know, the way in which Albert Alemany wanted to work. I'm not going to discuss the whole project, but we wanted to cover all of the patio, backyard. It's trapezoid shape. It's the idea was to create like a small square in front of the little palace, and at the same time, the waiters, of course, had to go from the kitchen to the palace, and people would use this little narrow street, like little notch like street in between the fence and the palace. So I prepared a little model with pins. That's just cardboard, cut cardboard, and it is, you know, serried to leave this interstitial space, you know, between the fences, and we will see how that translates. And then the great invention is the roof frame. I mean, the roof frame doesn't go on top or below the beam, on top or below the roof. Remember Mies, he would place beams outside, or what's usual is to place the beam and attach the roof. No, the cover, the roof goes through the beam. So the roof itself is part of the beam. It's the transverse, you know, and then there's the railing. And those roof frames, in some cases, they were 11 meters long. Some are shorter. This one's longer. This one is 11 meters. All of these are 11 meters. These are shorter. It's the same beam, but cut. If you want to do, just like on a floor covering, you know, or, I don't know, plywood or covering, and you don't want to see the edges, you need to work on many, you know, and it's the same with structural element. If you have to cover 11 meters, surely if you go to a structural engineer, he would say 2 L shapes of 60 or 80 or 100, and some crossbars and rigidizers for the compression of the beam, then railings or angles or T-shapes or whatever. And then, you know, you're given a beam or a blind. Now you can optimize this using small profiles, which at the same time serve another purpose. You know, the cross beam of the windowsill here, of the window shutter here. Let's see, I can't manage to work with this mouse. Here, now, here this is an omega profile. Why is it an omega profile? Because the omega profile, it's so rigid, and it helps in this sense. I can rest on the wings of the omega the plates of the roof toward one side and another, and they rotate in a polygonal way. And secondly, they don't get together, and they're the drains. They project to the outside, and then water coming from the roof goes through the omega, and it becomes like a gutter. And the piece here, this omega piece here is 40, size 40, 4 centimeters. This piece here plus the wings, this is a rail of 1 centimeter times 8, and it's solid, welded. It's welded in the inferior part of the omega and in the part here of this tube profile here. Sometimes it goes on top, sometimes it's underneath, because the roof is going through there. Here you see that on the model. On this rail you would fix the glass polygonally, you know, directly, you know, closing the distance between each of the roofs. And then the tubes that make up the upper part of the inferior superior belt, these are two tubular squares of 40 that coincide with the omega, but the rail then goes through the sole of the omega and, you know, goes down to the tube. So with 4 very small pieces we have a beam 11 meters that can help us place the glass and the cover inside and the drains, and that's the inclination, you know, the tilting of the beam so that the roof has the minimum inclination, minimum slope for the water, and that is fixed by the other. And that's the invention once built. You see the glass, the omega profiles, the rail 1 times 8, the inferior, the lower profile, and the roof plates. And the roofs are just, you know, covers of 5 centimeters made of aluminum sheet, perforated at the bottom with isolation, and since it's perforated against isolation, acoustically it works great inside because it's the whole perimeter made of glass, so the ceiling and the floor had to absorb the sound access. So you kill 2 birds with 1 stone. We isolate the exterior and you know, use acoustic material. It's the micro perforation here on these plates. There are plates like that, they come like that when they sell them to you, and that's the effect of light. And now we will see the pillars that support these frames. Again, tubes of 4 centimeters, 7 or 8 meters high. We have like an intermediate strap that divides the glasses in 2, otherwise it would be 7 meters high. So this is the strap that links and prevents the mini pillars from warping or buckling. The mini pillars are 40 centimeters. And here at the back you see the interstices with the plants. That is the square of the French palace, the little square with the stone floor and the entrance here, whereas the other one, the little square here, the glasses act like a mirror from the palace. See the pillars, 4 centimeters. Here are the edges of the glasses, and here you see the ramp through which the waiters enter. It's like a tube shape so that they don't rush too much with the trays and end up falling down. This is the ramp that's very useful for the waiters. That's the way they come out, the waiters, and then the clients would enter through the other side. Here is the ramp with the lights, and we're inside. Here we're already inside. Since the floor is risen, all the fittings go through the floor, air conditioning, all the machinery, you know, behind. And see the effectiveness of, you know, nearly nothing, nearly 10 centimeters at the edge of the carpentry against the lateral walls, and small 60-50 of these triangles. You know, this with the bamboo, it would offer this, you know, impression of, you know, eating between the plants, but the plants would be outside, and that is the brace that braces the cylindrical pillars, and how the glasses, the crystals are installed, and then the lights and the wooden floor and the roof here, the cover letting in the light. 6 years it took us to build this. You know, fitting it all, drawing it all, going to the different plants, manufacturers. It was so funny, you know, to go on site inspection every Friday with the people there I mean, you can even imagine it would really pay off the time that we spent with them. You see the chair? The chair was designed by Pieter Sands because I thought that the chairs would like mark a plane with the linen table covers. I didn't like them, and I designed this chair, you know, for right-handed people and left-handed people, so it doesn't have an armrest, so you can do things with your friends, with your neighbor next chair, and you can even use this small crutch to hang your bag onto it, and it's longer here, so you rest your arm on the small rest, and the backrest helps here, and the curve is a diagonal, and like that you can, I mean, after lunch you can spend time, because Albert Alemany, people said people don't stay long, you know, and it's because of the chairs. So, well, we worked on the chairs, and that's the restaurant with the new chairs. So we placed the chairs, and the restaurant was so successful. I mean, for 7-8 months, and then it was demolished. It had the time to be awarded like a finalist category by the FAD awards, but it was demolished. It was demolished because the city hall in Barcelona did not include the French Palace in the catalog. So the owner, since, well, there was some legal issue with another building or something, you know, she had a lawyer, and well, she managed to have it demolished, and when the catalog, when it was actually cataloged, it was too late, and the palace and the restaurant had disappeared. I have the chairs at home, I have them with me, but it lasted, I mean, very little. 6 years to build it, 6 months of life. A little exaggeration, but still, it's a building that I really love. When I'm asked to name one building, I always mention Lola. That's the name we gave it to it. You know, Lola. Albert Alemany gave it such a Spanish name. Lola was the name of the building. And just to end, here is this picture that I forgot to show you in the first lecture entitled Thicker Than Paper. Remember that I said that I didn't want to discuss you know, towers. Eduard did that, by the way, because, well, I would have deviated much from the topic of the class, you know, walls and beams. But then I forgot to say that I wanted to discuss the horizontal towers, like a groundscaper, like a horizon scraper. Like you have this in the mountain of Montjuic on top of the port with a structural mechanism that is unbelievable, designed by Juan Calvo de Pondio. It's a series of concentrical rings that come in a compressed fashion in such a way that, you know, the idea, these are 150-meter cantilevers, but it's the same, a cantilever like that, like that. Like this and like that, it's the same. The weight is irrelevant. A skyscraper, you can calculate at, you know, the warping and the buckling. You calculate the lateral winds, and you know, here the weight is irrelevant. And I have the advantage that since it's on the floor, wind is much weaker than, you know, at a height of 150 meters. Of course, you can imagine. And if you take a pencil and you press it here and you make this compression effort, you know, inward here and compression down here, traction on top, bending it is so much more difficult. So the anchoring mechanism is this one. You use strong pressures on the stone because it's the wall's made of Montjuic stone, so you tense to the inside of the mountain with traction, and you know, link it to the compressed rings pulled by cables in all the profiles. This turns it into a, you know, witty structure. So you can work on a huge cantilever. Those were 12 by 12 meters, 3 interior plans, and for the purposes of I don't know what, I mean, that was not a commission. I self-commissioned it. And I said, well, here in Montjuic, that would be nice because in the cities you always see, you know, the skyline. In Barcelona, you would have the skyline of, you know, narrow flags. And in Montjuic, when you arrive in the city through the air or through the sea, interesting structural mechanism. I forgot to say that in the first class that I wanted to show you today. So, questions. You, Eduard, you asked the question. You can ask another one if you want. The importance, we've seen, I believe, the importance, not just the construction, but the importance of working with the industry, you know. You mentioned some brands. Tecnal, exactly. You've mentioned several manufacturers. And in the end, we architects support each other. And I think that the construction industry makes headway insofar as there is collaboration in these moments of creation, you know, when the project is initiated during the construction stage, together with the workers, specialized workers, and the manufacturers, so you can then approve solutions or adapt them, as you explained in the case of Toro. Yes, or simply, you know, by optimizing the Tecnal catalog. Tecnal had thick carpentry, and at one point in time I said, I want them fine and thinner, and they said, no, it's impossible because the support and the weight and load bearing and the glass. And we said, but listen, this is nonsense because, you know, having a carpentry that thick, that deep, you know, against the wind, they need to resist the wind. I mean, it's silly if you place it like that, and the facade, it's smaller, but it has much more inertia. So by discussing this, the Unicity was born, you know. That is the origin, about, you know, going and talking to them day after day, and then someone thought about it, and the first Unicities were created. And Ignacio always says so, and sometimes I've been called to ask this, you know, it's about optimizing a catalog. The Parex case, for instance, building with the industry. I will discuss with in the latest class on the materiality of the atmosphere, because you've seen these facade filters like a shutter, a window, a curtain, you know, store, or an interior window. You can use several pieces and exert climatic control on a building. And today glass offers such a degree of you know, safety, and the price of the glass is, well, there are smart glasses, but you cannot work with them because then the building, it looks ugly. They're horrible because they're, I don't even know if they're transparent, but they have their advantages, you know, UV light refusal, and then solar control and thermal control. But Ignacio Aparicio, he invented the filters, and you can go into the website and research that, with several layers. Well, we've created some inventions for climates like, you know, weathers like in the Cappadocia, tropical weather, or in the Caribbean or continental weathers, different weathers. And simply with these filters, placing the outside shutter in such a way, and the solar filter, and then the you know, the window blind, there's a blind that rolls up in the two directions. I only received the catalog this morning and I don't quite understand. I need to have a look at it. But we said with Ignacio, a shutter that leaves the floor to, you know, be rolled up. Wouldn't it be best if it would open like that, this way, and then open it up a little bit more, or maybe just, I mean, don't touch the ledge. I mean, wouldn't that be easier with some balance weights and stuff? So there are great inventions to be created. So with a window shutter and a normal glass, Climalit 4+4 or 4+6, 6+6, or Stadip, if it is the case, right? And an outside window, you can isolate anything. I mean, you have the Roca glass, and that's thick and solid, but over 60 decibels, it's impossible to isolate. So with this outside wall that Ignacio has created, with formica, etc. 85 decibels. That's the amount that you can isolate, plus the, the outside wall and the ledge and the shutter. With Ramon, we are working on these stories. You can create fantastic things at a very affordable price. The outside shutters were old-fashioned, glass and the shutter, outside, but you alternate that, you combine this with the current technology, and you can mechanize them in different ways, and you can, apply an engine, a motor. You have a repertoire of facades that is never-ending for any weather, for any climate, and you do that with the help of the industry, as Albert was saying. Exactly. Ramon, it's been a fantastic lecture, and I'm going to tell you why. Because Ferrater has not always told us about the architectural interests, but he has told us how he manages to get to those interests and to make them a reality. That's very important. That is the profession. One doesn't have to know all the constructive details of all the carpenters in the world to, be a professional. You have to have the ideas clear and go find whatever you want to find, or invent whatever you want to invent. And that is a good architect. That is a great architect. So it's been like a professor, really truly architecture professor lecture, and it's a professor that works on projects, doesn't publish books and papers. He does projects. That's very important. Many years ago, and Ferrater knows that all these inventions, many of these inventions made by great architects, stay in the works, in the buildings, and they die there. But in reality, many of these inventions, many of these, findings, many of these studies and efforts, it would be great for someone to gather them together so that they would be available for everyone. So we've started with a story some years ago now, and we're working on that. That ceiling, you showed 4 of your works. Fantastic, marvelous. This is something that should be made available to everyone. And I'm referring to the ceiling or the roof, but it could be the carpentry or the false ceiling, that you're working on now. Exactly, because these are inventions that I think it would be wrong to keep them. I think they should be made public, expanded, and I really enjoyed today's lecture because you've discussed architecture, of course, but you said that in architecture, everything needs to link with architecture, and it needs to be built. Anything that links with architecture needs to be built. We are architects. We are not industrial designers. We are not graphic designers. So I think that it's been a great, great lecture, and I truly mean it. I remember once, years ago, in the school of the Architects Association with Pere Joan Ravellat, we were commissioned some courses on architecture, and I remember I called Pepe Ginás, and we asked them, you have to tell us about the library. I think it was in the district of Gracia. And okay, how much time do I have? And we said 4 hours. 4 hours? He said, I can tell you all about it in 15, 20 minutes. And we said, no, we want to give you 4 hours, because in 15 minutes you will tell us a little bit about the project, but you will have 4 hours. And you should have seen Pepe Llenas discussing the construction details, the amounts of things that stay there. That's being an architect. That's doing architecture. So it's been fantastic. You need to remember this lecture, really. When you are architects and you are faced with a problem, think of Ferrater and how he would find and wouldn't end up finding solutions. And even, if it took 6 years for a solution to be found, well, so be it. So he's taught you that. So we need to be grateful. There's something very interesting also, very important. We cannot forget that in the exercise, we can constructively build and develop what Carlos was saying. Remember, you have to look at the building from afar, from the outside, to find out what was going on. He told us the problem with the cantilever, the rod solutions, a series of thickness that will affect the way in which we will see the building, like a plate. When you document the construction works of this exercise that we are working on, there's always a plate, a sheet of detail, of construction detail that must be there, a small drawing, 1/500. I mean, that's the beginning of coherence, you know, you and the building and what you think of the building and the details. It's not an isolated thing. It really is linked, very much linked. And it's been so clear when Carlos was showing us an angle and a drawing at a scale of 1/5, 1/2, 1. It started out with the first observation from afar, and that link with the building is key. Yes, it is. Well, if there are no further questions, off to work. Thank you.